Have you ever not slept for so long that you started hallucinating? What was your experience? Yeah. After 70 hours or so, it's pretty disorienting, and rational thinking starts to get very slow. The hallucinations are not realistic, but are more like gaps in your vision that are shaped like things. Might see a silhouette at a distance, or briefly around a corner. Very difficult to function in this state. Would not recommend. For me, the sleep afterwards isn't very quality either. I usually wake up feeling shitty still. It feels like I'm stressing in my sleep. Indeed. Especially with caffeine, which tends to mess with your system in unpleasant ways after so many hours awake. Yes, caffeine doesn't wake up, but inhibits the tired bit of your brain. When you are seriously sleep deprived already, the results are unpleasant. I've had skin crawling, profuse sweating, bucket loads of anxiety. I really noticed a few times I drank coffee to wake up before exams. My performance was crap. Heart pounding, hand sweating, brain racing from thought to thought without slowing down to get things right. I don't notice that day to day, but I guess the caffeine plus the stress of a situation like that is just too much. A buddy of mine landed a painting job working inside of a big commercial building, and he basically stayed in the place for 6 days straight smoking crystal meth and painting to meet his deadline and avoid hiring a crew to help him. On the 6th day, the building caught fire and he ran into the lobby and was pulling people out into the streets and yelling to call 911. The fireman showed up and couldn't locate a fire because there was none. He was hallucinating. I feel like paint fumes also had something to do with it. 6 days of meth and paint fumes. No wonder he thought the building was on fire. His brain probably was. I always thought it was the drugs that made addicts crazy, but now I'm convinced it's mostly the sleep deprivation. Okay, story time. My mom suffers from narcolepsy, and one of the first treatments they gave her basically drove her also completely insane. She was up for 5 days. One day I walked into her bedroom hearing her talking to someone. I look around and ask her who she is talking to, and she tells me the lady in red. There is no one in the room at all, just us. I ask where is the lady, and she says the lady sits on the dresser and talks to her all night. I was like 14 at the time, so I went to the kitchen and hid her medicine until my stepdad got home and could take her to the hospital. The doctor was super upset about the meds her doctor had given her. It was way too much. Anyway, she stopped seeing the lady after they got all that straightened out. That is scary. I hadn't slept for about 72 hours when I went to the doc gave me Ambien. I go home, get in bed and take one. A few minutes later, the floor was covered in water and the walls were melting. It was raining outside and the water on my windows was marching in formation. I've never known whether that was sleep deprivation or the effects of Ambien. I've never taken another. I was prescribed Ambien once. I took it and I could still wake up on it, but I started seeing the shadows in the corner of my room curling up and almost moving. It was freaky. I don't take Ambien anymore. Ex-addict was driving home after a 3-day meth bender. Needed food, so drove into a McDonald's drive-thru. When asked for my order, I replied McChicken meal, please. Then they asked me again, and I said McChicken meal, please. Then they asked me again, and I was like, can't you duck and hear me? McChicken meal. And that's when I realized I wasn't actually saying anything. I was just replying in my head. I went roughly 4 days on 5 hours sleep total. I could function fine, but I would just constantly hear things like people mumbling right next to me. Yeah. It's not like you see pink elephants on parade or anything. You think you hear people chatting behind you, or you see stuff moving just on the edge of your vision. Super creepy and unfun, but not particularly dramatic. Yes, I saw shadow creatures, and I thought they were out to get me. Me too. I had been sleep deprived for weeks, 3 hours a night most nights, and hadn't slept the night before. I was out a walk with friends and we stopped for a bit, and then I started seeing the shadows move. Then they looked like a pile of bodies, and then I was convinced that they'd come drag me into the pit. Get some sleep, this experiment isn't worth it. Overseas on a deployment, started getting sleep deprived for a period of time. Started hallucinating the big date / palm trees moving across the road like in the Lord of the Rings when the trees walk. This always makes me question some of the weird shit I saw. Was it real, or was I just really ducking tired from op-tempo? Memories tend to gather as a group too. Me and 2 other guys were on the post that saw the VBIED explosion, and all 3 of us had the exact same story to a T. Thing is, only 1 person was on post and we rotated throughout the day. We have no idea whose memory it actually was, but the shock of the situation just kind of merged our recollections over the next day and we couldn't figure out who was actually on post. Memories are ducking strange. I stayed up for 3 days straight when I was 17. On the 3rd day, I kept hearing people call my name, as if they wanted to ask me a question. It didn't help that I also thought it would be a good idea to go to school that day, multiple times a day. I would bolt upright and look around to see who wanted my attention, only to see my fellow students huddled over their work. It got worse as the day went. My friends were a little worried about how weird I was acting. I walked home after school, listening to my headphones as usual, but I still kept hearing someone call my name. The music made it worse. Whatever I was hearing was already kind of muffled, and having a song playing in my ears only seemed to obscure it more. When I finally got home, I told my mom I wasn't feeling well, went to my room, and went straight to sleep at 4 in the afternoon. As nodded off, I heard that voice calling for me again, making me jerk out of my sleep. This repeated a couple times, until I convinced myself that I already told my mom I was sick, and if she really needed me, she could come get me. I finally went to sleep and didn't wake until 2 AM to use the bathroom, and then went to sleep afterwards again until 9 AM the next day. I was an idiot. This is very similar to my experience at about the same age. Same amount of time awake. I've always had sleep issues, but I'll never do that again. Fucking shadow people. It's bad for you. You shouldn't do it. But if you're asking this question, you're the type to try. Remember, it's not real and relax. Go to sleep. For a while, when I was active duty, I got really paranoid about the shadow people for obvious reasons. You have no idea the relief I felt when I found out I wasn't the only one who saw them. I really thought I was losing it, but man, I was just exhausted. After a while I start to become seriously paranoid and I start hearing voices and things like that. It's not very fun. I have some serious issues with sleep, and sometimes it will get to the point where I will start seeing things out the corners of my eye that aren't actually happening, and I manage to scare the shit out of myself. Please get enough sleep. Don't fall into the habit of staying up for days on end. The longer you stay up, the harder it is to fall asleep. It seriously gets harder to fall asleep the longer you go, and you think you're tired, and you go to sleep, and you just can't. And the sleep isn't even that good when you do eventually fall asleep. I was like 2-day awake, and every time I laid on my bed I couldn't do anything besides stare at the ceiling, with my head spinning, absolutely shit face down, exhausted, and still couldn't actually get any sleep. And the sleep is indeed shitty. You wake up with a dry mouth, dizzy, terrible headache, still feeling tired, almost like a hangover. People who are reading this and have insomnia, get help ASAP. It doesn't get better over time. If you don't get help, take care of yourselves. It's almost a regular occurrence for me by now, because I suffer from insomnia. There are 3 different types of hallucinations for me. 1. Funny, useless shit I know is fake. 2. Shit that could be real or not. 3. Extremely scary and traumatic shit I know is fake, but rattles me up every single time. Usually, they appear in that order. Pro tip: if you are experiencing visual hallucinations and you aren't sure whether something is real or not, take a photo with your smartphone and look at that. It is very unlikely that you hallucinate the same shit twice and in the exact same position. Works for me. At last. Edit. Holy son of a biscuit eater. This just about blew up in a matter of hours. I received a handful of genuinely interested people's questions and I'll try to answer all of them. Should I receive even more? To most of them, I already replied. We'll continue later. Because, as I'm typing this, I'm awake at an hour I should not be awake. so I'll try and get some more shooty. Imagine the irony. Spent a few weeks only getting about 4 hours of sleep a night. My brain started seeing, from the corners of my eyes, black things dropping from the ceiling that looked like giant spiders. I started making sure I got enough sleep. Like in Prey video game. I actually haven't seen that video game. I don't really do video games. But basically, you turn your head, and out of the corner of your eye, you see a black spider, about the size of a quarter or a $half drop from the ceiling. And it keeps happening. And there's no spider there. And your brain kinda makes everything flicker a little. And you feel exhausted, and your brain feels like it's constantly on the verge of a panic attack. In Prey, the spiders are dog-sized and attack you. And they can transform into everyday objects like chair, or change their shape. After 30 hours I started seeing insects on the walls and on my desk that weren't there. Might have just been the light, or paranoia because I'm massively afraid of spiders. Made it to 50 hours without really seeing anything else though. During exam week I pulled 3 all-nighters in the library between tests. The library was open 24 hours, so I'd just stay up all night making note cards then go take an exam during the day. I lived off campus and didn't want to spend the gas money. I'd go to the most isolated area, but the library would pretty much be cleared out by midnight. I started to see glimpses of people, and I thought it was a bunch of students ducking with me, but there was no one on that floor. I thought the lights went off at some point and maybe it was a sensor, so I started jumping around to reactivate it, but obviously, it was light the whole time. Was staying up all those nights worth it for your exams? Did you do well? Asking because I might be in the same situation in a couple days. It's definitely not worth it. Shadow demons coming to get me, they're very fast. And they're like black and just like scutter around your vision. Sometimes they jump out at me from my phone screen. No sleep for 4 days straight. It really ducks with your head. All sounds heightened to the maximum, and was sure I could hear all my neighbors talking shit about me. Oh god yes. The auditory hallucinations are not fun. I didn't have visual hallucinations but auditory. It was like music and very nice, but scary because you didn't know where it came from. Was it never gonna give you up? Had a good one. Getting rickrolled by your hallucinations. That would basically be your brain rickrolling itself lol. Once in my early 20s I took acid and didn't sleep at all for like 3 days. At one point on the 3rd day a door told me to go duck myself, and I really wasn't sure if it was from the drugs building up over time or because I was so tired. I guess there's some confusion over the wording, but this was not one dose. This was multiple red doses over the course of 3 days with diminishing returns. A door told me to go duck myself. Was it Jim Morrison? It could have been Mr. Mojorism. Semicolon dash close bracket. PLS, don't do this to yourself. If you do, believe me you will start seeing crap. It's weird and mentally burdensome and heavy. I'd start imagining shadow people and dark shapes lurking just outside my vision. Objects start looking like demons if I'm not staring directly at it. I know it's not actually paranormal shit, but still gets me. It's not hallucinating like a drug trip by DKY attempt that. Same to a T for me. The longest I've gone is 3 days and I would see shadows that would distort really weird and make you think they moved or someone was there. I also had auditory hallucinations, as in I would hear my name when I was alone. Shit was terrifying. Never again. So in training to join the British Army Infantry, everyone does a defense exercise. Basically you deploy onto the area, then spend 72 straight hours digging trenches. No sleep, no rest. It's a double whammy between sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Although I never hallucinated, I did pass out onto some bloke though. I did see a few blokes experience crazy stuff. One bloke walked into a foggy field and was missing for hours. Once he realized he was lost, he laid on the floor, flipping between the channels on his radio saying hello and hoping someone would hear him. Another bloke who was a Welsh speaker lost the ability to distinguish between the two languages. He'd speak to you in Welsh, then get annoyed when you didn't understand him, believing he was speaking perfect English. Yeah, we pulled a solid week of defensive exercise with sleep departure. Shadow people are the worst. Always in and out of your peripherals. Bushes move. Sneak up on you in the twilight. The worst was about day 4. Moving into position for a night raid. Somewhere along the way, while marching in full fighting order, I must have fallen asleep. In my mind. Found myself entering an old timey jazz club filled with shadow people. I stood around watching them all. Till suddenly a shadow person with glowing eyes jumped out and attacked. Woke up with the section 2 Ike grabbing my chest and pulling me out of a ditch. In retrospect, I probably got focused in the cat eyes on the helmet in front of me, got hypnotized by them, and wandered off into the ditch. What was maybe worse than the sleep deprivation itself was post-exercise the promise of extended leave. Only when, if, we could sleep for over 8 straight hours. We all thought that would be no problem. We longed for rest and would nod off for a few minutes every chance we got. When we were finally ordered into forced rest for leave, none of us could sleep for longer than 15 minutes at a time. It was pure torture. In the end, our extended leave was 2 days of teaching our bodies to sleep again with only a single day of leave for most of us at the end. Moral of the story, I would not recommend. My cousin was killed in a car crash after doing one of these exercises, and they let them go home afterwards. Driver fell asleep at the wheel and crashed head on with a pickup truck. Glad they made you sleep first. I don't suggest doing this at all, but my first one is a little more funny than scary. I worked third shift at a gas station for 6 years. Didn't sleep for 3 days due to insomnia. I was so out of it. I thought there was a purple unicorn named Hugo chilling in the back office, watching me on the cameras and smoking cigarettes. Hugo the purple unicorn would come out and tell me about Philip, the red rhino, taking his business. That's when I knew I needed sleep. Mind you, Hugo the purple unicorn and Philip the red rhino were cartoonish, kind of like Space Jam. Another experience I had was black liquid dripping from everyone's faces. I always made sure to get enough sleep after that experience. I mistook a kettle for a loaf of bread and tried to put it in the toaster. Hey PSSST. Please subscribe and like.